when we had the 1948 riot, the 1948 riot was as a result of the demand that was made by ex-servicemen, Ghanaian soldiers who were sent to fight a war that had nothing to do with them. Second World War, it was not part of our war. We had nothing to do with it. But because we were still under the servitude of colonialism, they were sent to fight a war. And some promises were made of decent accommodation and some stipends that were to be given to them. Unfortunately, when they came down, they refused to give them those things. So they demonstrated. They were working towards the castle.
The question about castle.
And then it took one very silly, and I want to avoid the words because I'm actually in the month of Ramadan. Major Imri, a British, military officer who instructed that they should be gunned down, and those ex-servicemen were gunned down. There was an upheaval. An upheaval. It generated, people started destroying things and destroying properties of the so-called colonial masters. Now, that led to the rounding up of the so-called political figures at the time, particularly some of the UGCC members. Nkrumah was not even in Accra. Nkrumah was at Solpom. When they rounded them up, they all said they had no hands in it, that it was Nkrumah who masterminded the riot. That's what they said.
1948 riot.
That's what they said. The other five all said, including J.B. Dankwa, that it was Nkrumah who masterminded the 1948 riot. You know what they did? They arrested Nkrumah and freed them. Nkrumah was incarcerated. Today, because some people indeed have attempted to rewrite our history, they claim that these are the Big Six. There was nothing like Big Six. A lot of them were traitors. So, if indeed Nkrumah, and in fact, as a matter of fact, if you read I Speak of Freedom, Nkrumah's book, Nkrumah indicated clearly he had nothing to do with the 1948 riot. It was an upheaval, an implosion of the Ghanaian people because of what happened at the Christianborg Castle, which is now, the Osu Castle. So there was a demonstration. When they rounded them up and interrogated them, they all said it was Nkrumah. So they freed them and incarcerated Nkrumah. Today, you want us to eulogize those people who betrayed this country. And as a matter of fact, it is important for us also to know that even after J.B. Dankwa died, there was allegation that Nkrumah indeed killed him. That he was killed because Nkrumah. But when there was even a commission by the NLC to investigate the matter, sorry, the NLM or the NLC to investigate the matter, it was established that what they claim to be the cause of the death of J.B. Dankwa was actually not the cause. Google bombing. And there are a lot of things if you want to. And to tell you the truth, I'm a political scientist. I hold a PhD in political science. So truth is sacrosanct to me. And I don't care who is hurt by the truth. And if you observe all the cacophony that is going on, they haven't been able to challenge the statement I made. What instead they are doing, they are engaged in very silly tribal bigotry that I should apologize to Achim people because I criticized J.B. Dankwa. When you had Achim MPs who stood on the floor of Parliament and called President Mama Jiro, they called President Mills, Professor Doolittle. In fact, it was President Nanado. So Fantis should also, Fantis should come out and say that they should apologize to Fantis for criticizing Prof. Mills. Or Gonjas come out and say, apologize to Gonjas for criticizing President. What silliness is this?
I believe there's a chain or order of how these things would be, dealt with. What's the Speaker's position on this?
There was nothing wrong with that. If there was anything wrong with the statement I made, the Speaker would have had problems with it, even the MPP members of Parliament. They never asked that that statement be expunged. If they felt that that statement was not true, they would have demanded that it is expunged from the Hansards. I never made any statement attributing to me, Murtala, who is saying that this is who J.B. Dankwa is. Look, this country, there have been several attempts to rewrite the history of this country. And there have been several attempts by the NPP administration, which is a fact. You remember even the celebration of Independence Day. I'm saying that the fact is that there was nothing like Big Six. Hold on, there was nothing like Big Six. those so-called other 5 added to Nkrumah, and they are now telling us big 6. And that is the history that kids have been taught. That is completely misleading, because if you look at what they all did after the 1948 riot, and these are facts, the interrogation, all the statements they all made are facts. Those interrogations are very clear, and they said that they never did it. It was Nkrumah, when Nkrumah was not even in Accra. Nkrumah was put behind bars and they were freed. And we think that we should give them some honor. You see, it is important for us to understand history. It is important for us to appreciate how far we have come.
Is the ninth Parliament
might have done a lot of things. I just said it in terms of the law, his practice, and others. I don't discount it at all. May I respect knowledge, I respect research, I respect people who have achieved something as a result of intellectual work, in which I respect. But when it comes to the political history of this country, these are not my words.
Are we going to use the 9th Parliament to score points on political history, rebuttals here and there, because this person said this, and so we're going to now shake the core foundation of the country?
It depends on democracy. You know, frankly speaking, such engagements are good. Look, in Parliament we can debate sometimes very hot debates, and then after that you see us at a coffee shop. I mean, you would have seen the talking. Parliament is a house where brains work.
But does that sway you away from your core mandate in Parliament? So debates on bills and legislations.
The debate, in fact, a debate is part of the core mandate. The function of members of Parliament is to legislate, is to protect public purse, to demand accountability, and to ensure that represent, because the people we represent. So you have representation, legislature, you have accountability, for particularly financial accountability. We represent the wishes, the aspirations, and the feelings of the people we represent. So Parliament engage in debate.
Okay.
It's a form of education.
Right.
Because you cannot say anything in Parliament that is not factual.
Okay. Since you've mentioned legislation, let's talk about the ministry that you're heading now. From information to trade, then to here. You said you made a detour to employment labor. Okay, and now you're and now so you're still a minister for employment labor relations. We would say now you're
deputy minister.
Deputy minister.
Deputy for 2 weeks. In fact, I didn't even settle.
Deputy for 2 weeks.
No, you are going to. In fact, that's one thing many people do not know.
Okay.
The first call I got was from, I remember at that time, Honorable Valerie. So look, the president is sending you to employment, and I thank you, and I said, extend my gratitude and thanks to His Excellency, the President. In fact, that day I packed my bag and baggage for
ready to go.
Information. Then I moved.
Okay.
I moved in there. Then I got a call again. I think about a week or less than a week or 2 weeks. Then look, they are moving you to Ministry of Trade and Industries, and I say, extend my gratitude and thanks to His Excellency the President, and I moved there.
You're ready to serve.
Yes.
Now, your ministry, you started work in earnest. You're talking about helping fund sanitation companies, demonopolizing the system, galamsey, lots of arable land. I hear millions of hectares lost to cocoa farms, lost to galamsey. What is the charge that you're leading in these areas?
First and foremost, let me tackle galamsey first. It's a catastrophic thing that is confronting us as a people. Everybody knows the consequences of galamsey, one, to our livelihood, to our water bodies, to even our survival. And I say our survival because if we don't take time, it may affect some of our, exporting commodities, particularly cocoa. When we have the seepage of some of these heavy metals that they use, it can affect the quality of the cocoa we produce. It affects agricultural activities. It affects the livelihood of people. It affects the habitat. People, fishing communities, people can no longer fish because the water is destroyed. Galamsey, indeed, which started as socio-economic or an environmental issue, has become a political issue and featured profoundly in the last 3 elections that we have had in this country, particularly these elections. President Mahama promised to do that which has never been done, to ensure we fix this galamsey problem. We understand that it's a multifaceted challenge, and therefore you need a multi-pronged approach to be able to solve it. And that is why it involves several ministries. Of course, the Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology, it involves Ministry of Lands, Ministry of Interior and Defense, because there are security implications, to it. And also, and most significantly, Minister of Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs. Yeah. Remind you, the custodians of the lands are the traditional leaders, and then they have a significant role. So what we have started doing is to deepen the stakeholder engagement, so that hitherto those who were not part of the processes of finding a solution to it, we are bringing them on board. Isn't it ironic that the previous administration had a committee, interministerial committee, constituted to fight galamsey, and Minister of Environment was not represented? As a matter of fact, Minister of Environment started it, but when Professor Frimpong Boateng started accusing people in the NPP government, they got him out, and they never had a representation of the Minister of Environment into it, a ministry that must play a lead role. So we are doing things concurrently. As I talked to you, we have had a lot of engagement, and that is why when I was vetted, I made references to both Quranic quotations and biblical quotations. Specifically, I talked about Genesis 2:15 and Quran chapter 2 verse 30, where God himself admonishes us to do everything possible to protect the world, protect the environment. And even in Islamic jurisprudence, even in war, in battles, the Holy Prophet admonished that you don't cut down trees, you don't destroy water bodies. And clearly, and that hadith is sahih, it's an authentic statement the Holy Prophet made. There are several verses in the Bible that God himself admonishes us to do everything possible to protect it. So I made references to those biblical and Quranic quotations as a certain way of sending a message to our clergy, that they also have a role to play as far as, you know, fighting environmental degradation and protecting same is concerned. I did so because they must be. Ghanaians are largely religious, and majority of Ghanaians on Sunday are either in churches, on Friday they are in mosques. You know, Ghanaians are. So if we have them play a role, so that on their pulpit or on their sermons, and Islam we call it the mimbars, and then the Fridays, they can be bringing out some of this and admonishing people to also participate in protecting the environment. So we have brought in religious leaders, traditional authorities. But we are not stopping there. We are also doing it concurrently with the security forces getting into the forest areas to stop that. Now we have started a process to repeal the LI 4262, which the NDC have actually done the necessary with the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, you know, rolled back to us and then assigned it today. We shall start the process to repeal that aspect of the law. Now, so in as much as we do that, the other question is that if we're able to stop people from mining in those areas, destroying our water bodies, then the justification, rightly or wrongly, that they are engaged in galamsey because they do not have jobs, what are we doing? So we are looking at providing alternative livelihood for those people. And fits perfectly in President Mohammed's vision of the Blue Water Initiative as captured in the NDC manifesto, and every man per tree, tree for life, and we have extended it. And if you listen to President Mahama, the sooner he said every child per tree, because we feel the children are very competitive. When you engage children in tree planting, it helps. The Minister of Minister of Lands, they sunk millions of, hundreds of millions of Ghana cedis
in the Green Ghana Day.
Where are the trees? Well, and I think it ought to be
evidently millions of trees have been planted every year, and the minister led the charge. The media was there to cover the tree planting across the country. So you're calling for an audit of those trees that were planted across the world for 8 years.
You went there, where are those trees? Where are they? There is one thing attempting to plant trees, and mind you, each tree they claim they planted had a market value. I think that there should be some proper auditing in that. And because you had a ministry that didn't have the capacity to do that, was engaged in that, and some people leverage their proximity, if you like, to the appointing authority, it ought to have been handled by a ministry with the capacity to do that. And that ministry is Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology. So I'm saying that those we have had, now the lands are destroyed the more, the lands are not reclaimed, the water bodies are not restored. On Saturday, I represented His Excellency the President as Addis Adal College. So I flew to Takoradi and drove by road to Cape Coast. On my way, the water I saw was shocking. President Mahama has indicated that this is not the time to lament. We are going to fix that problem. And what we are doing, you see that we are not even giving much publicity as to what the security agencies are doing. because once we give publicity, they get to know, and then we are acting, and there have been a lot of raids that are done in this forest areas, and I can tell you that these are things we intend to do. We are also indeed engaging some people to see how best we can clean the water bodies. I've had private entities who have approved the ministry, submitted proposals. The technical people are going through it. We're also looking at international funding sources.
Yes, you are asking for funding, so I was going to ask, where is it coming from?
Yes, we are looking at international funding sources. There are a lot of funding sources available. We are engaging a consultant who would work with MEST. In fact, MEST. I say MEST because of the alignment, the realignment of innovation to communication. There is some misunderstanding. It is just digital innovation that is given to communication.
Okay.
But actually, innovations in terms of agriculture, in terms of science, geology, in terms of atomic and others, they are still being handled by the Ministry of Environment, because all the agencies that operate under the ministry, their core mandate and function is to research and innovate.
Okay.
And so the innovation, even though by a policy decision has been realigned to Ministry of Communication, the digital innovation. Okay. But the other aspects are still with the ministry.
Funding,
so these are some of the things.
These are funding and international sources at a time when the US is cutting funding and aid to countries in Africa. How are we not looking inwardly, and we're still looking?
We look inwardly, and it is very clear that what the previous administration did, the fiscal space is so limited. I mean, the mess that is created, the outright robbery, because it's beyond thievery that we experience in this country, that there are problems every sector. I mean, debt to GDP actually ballooned. The city has actually lost its value. The city, the dollar is a fugitive now. We're told by my senior brother, Dr. Baumia, it was arrested, locked, and the key was given to the IGP. It has broken jail. There are a lot of challenges, genuinely, but that we need to look at innovative ways of executing government projects without necessarily depending on government of Ghana in terms of funding.
Is one of them also, not to cut you, recouping losses, like what the oil wants to do?
Yes.
Are we relying on sources like that as well? And how feasible is that? If it doesn't happen, what happens?
I am very convinced about the initiatives we have done, and I mean, in terms of the funding sources, international funding sources, we are looking at some of them. Not that they will give you money, but they will come and help to plant trees, and that is what our focus is. And we are looking at planting just trees that are commercially viable, that the people can engage in that. Because if you come and stop galamsey, clean the water bodies, and you don't solve the root cause for the galamsey, you would have done nothing. Or perhaps you don't solve the perceived root cause. Well, the people who are engaged in it argue that they are doing that because they don't have jobs. So if you come and stop galamsey, clean the water bodies, reclaim the degradable lands, and then the people still do not have jobs, they may be tempted to go back to it. So it's a multifaceted approach. Okay. We are ensuring that we reclaim the degradable land, restore the water bodies, and we're also looking at alternative livelihood for the people. And where the media has a major role to play, and I use this opportunity to call on you, particularly GBC, GTV, you have wider coverage, I guess, than any other media house, that if you can't also have a role to play in that. There's a video, that video went viral, and I believe that you would have seen that video, where a gentleman who sold his cocoa farm, while they were cutting the trees, the cocoa trees, to do galamsey, he sat there and said he couldn't pay his children's school fees, and he's been farming, engaged in cocoa farming for several years. Now with this sale, he's able to generate such a person need help. He needs help because, yes, you would have paid the fees of your child. First year, second year, third year, where would you have them, and the cocoa farm is gone. So I think that the media has a role to play to support government in sensitizing and educating people. The need for us collectively to also help towards, maintain the environment. The last point I want to make on this is that the carbon trade. When we came, I had a meeting today. Carbon trading is the way to go now. One, it helps you restore your degradable lands, and it also generates money for you. When you emit, there are companies, for in a simple explanation, you can have a private company that engages in, let's say, locomotive or vehicle manufacturing in America, for example. They can come and give us funding to plant trees. So when we plant trees, we reduce the emission level of greenhouse gases. They continue to emit. but they are paying for what they are emitting. They are paying that money to us, and then we can use them to do things that will sustain the environment and create the needed jobs. There's another thing President Muhammad mentioned, EVs, that is the electronic vehicles. People would love to have electronic vehicles, but the reason why many people are not encouraged to buy them is the infrastructure is not there. So what we intend to do at the ministry, we have had some proposals. We are going to have the charging systems, as President Muhammad said, across the country, and we may do it with some oil, some stations. But for example, if we do it with oil, so that we have the charging systems across oil stations in the country, so I can buy the e-vehicle, then I know that I wouldn't have any difficulty to charge them, because some of them, if you charge, they can go on for about 500 kilometers, some over 500 kilometers. But if I have an e-vehicle and I'm going to Kumasi, then I know that there's a charging system at Nkoko or somewhere. Okay. I drive, I top up, and then I'm...
And you don't foresee the system fighting you? I mean, you're talking of GOIL, and GOIL is, liquefied petroleum.
Yes, we are doing it in partnership with them. It doesn't mean that people won't still buy, cycle. People will still buy. But the way to go now is the e-vehicles. Okay. That is the way to go. And GOIL will also be generating money. This is just an example I'm giving. But we would have them dotted. Another one, last point on this, is the e-biking. President Muhammad promised this, the Okada, motorbikes. We are looking forward to doing it e-biking, so that they don't depend on liquefied petroleum or whatever for that. They can be having batteries, but they swap. Okay. Now it reduces the cost. It is environmental friendly. It helps, to reduce the emission level, and it also creates more jobs for young people in this country.
Right. Let me take your mind to the north. When you talk about commercial trees, you're from the north, and I'm sure you've heard how the heat season impacts the climate change and how farmers, a year ago, the dry spells, lack of rainfall, charcoal burning, cash crops like shea butter, rosewood. What's the plan demographically for the north as against here in the south?
I farm myself.
Okay.
I'm known to many people. I'm a very big rice farmer, and I have acres close. In fact, with the increases I'm having, it should be getting, in the ranges of 1,000 acres of rice farm, and it's been good. Now, unfortunately, as a result of climate change, farmers can no longer predict, the rains. When rains will start, when rains will end, we no longer predict. So it's just like firefighting. So there's no denying the fact that climate change is a huge challenge, even though President Trump, is denying the obvious. But there are people even in his government who think that the climate change is a reality, is affecting us, and what we intend to do is some of the interventions we've had. The presentation I had, there's a program called the JEF program, which is financed by these international funding sources, which includes reclaiming of the lands, planting of more trees. Now, if you look at the northern part of the country, it's virtually becoming desert because the trees, that is why I asked the earlier question.
Yeah.
My kid brother Abujinapo, the trees they claim they planted, where are they? If they claim they planted millions of trees, I mean, it is more even desertificated even than it was before. I think that such interventions are interventions that people must see some reality. That is why we want to have this.
Are you scrapping the Green Day tree plants?
I mean, clearly it was moribund. I mean, it didn't yield anything positive. If it did, where is the results? What we intend to do is to implement the every child per tree, so that this one is feasible. If you have a school that has, let's say, primary school, total number of students to be, let's say, 1,000, and you see that 1,000 trees must be planted by every child. It's something that is feasible, but you can easily tell. In that school, if you are bringing trees for every child to own a tree, will bring the number of trees that commensurate with the number of students. Okay. So that even if there is a market value for every tree, it can easily be accounted for.
What will be the tracking mechanism for that?
The tracking mechanism can also be done by you, the media. So that when we do, people can easily find out. If you see that we have planted 1,000 schools using 5 schools in northern Ghana and mention the names of the schools, you can all do your investigation, find out from the heads of those institutions how many trees did they bring. Transparency and avoiding corruption is sine qua non to any successful, projects that any government would want to implement. But what they did, Minister, when they plant trees, you couldn't even see the trees. There were a lot of questions that people asked. And remember, it generated some heat and debate as to whether indeed the number of trees they claimed they planted were the actual trees that were planted. And mind you, each tree had a market value. We must do things differently. Okay. And when children are allowed to do that, children are very competitive. Every child would have a responsibility to protect his tree. How those trees are going to be nurtured is something that we can fashion out. And as I talk to you, I've had meetings with some international funding institutions, with the consultants we are engaging. Because there's the physical space is limited, we think that we must leverage the opportunities therein in these international funding sources to be able to execute these government projects, and that is precisely what we intend.
Okay, so tree per child for the north, and that's going to
be across the country.
Yes, okay. Let's wrap it up with sanitation. Waste management in Ghana seems to be a problem. Technology and innovation, what's the support there for young companies, young brains pushing for job creation who will go into this area to change the face of our waste management?
Waste management comes in twofold. We have plastic waste, we have, what's the name? Electronic waste. Remember, I went to Agboboloshi recently. We have what we call a collection center, the e-waste, that is electronic waste, which is hazardous and dangerous to the lives of the people who even process them. And a lot of these young people, they go
the scrap dealers?
The scrap dealers.
Okay.
And apart from the scrap dealers, these young people who go around, they bring the e-waste, they need the copper.
Yeah.
The copper in it. And when they come, the only way they can access the copper is to burn those materials.
Absolutely.
So we created a center that is a collection center. And we have a bigger center somewhere. Now we realized that a lot of the young boys were no longer sent them to the collection centers. So I wanted to go there to find out. So I went to Agboboloshi myself. I guess your station was there to carry the story. And we realized that the people had a challenge with regards to the incentives that were given to them. And that is what we are working on. I've constituted a team, a small team headed by the chief director, to see how we can improve the incentives that is given to them. Again, I visited some plastic, recycling centers across the country, and I was surprised some of the potentials. We have some funding which we are giving to them, and when I came, it was left with me approving, and I said I will not approve anything unless I visit those centers themselves, ascertain, what they are doing by myself, and before I can go ahead to give the approval for the release of those funds from these international donor funding sources to them. Some of them get about $500,000, some get about $450,000. What they do is to collect these plastic wastes. Some of them, they recycle them, and then they sell them to recycling companies who turn them to finished product. The rubber buckets that we see, some also they pack them and then they sell them. And there are a lot of huge, demand for them. They all help to reduce. Only 10% of plastic waste that is generated in this country we are able to work on. Only 10%, particularly in Accra. Only 10%. So the other 90%, what happens? So we are looking at other funding sources where we can expand the facilities. 8 companies were selected. That is plastic waste recycling centers were selected, and then when we are approved, and then the other 11, I think that we should extend some to Kumasi, because I asked them why we don't have even a single one in Kumasi. We don't have one in the northern part of the country, in Volta, and they said pilot, but I said you cannot pilot without having one in Kumasi. I don't think that there's any city that will generate more plastic, than Kumasi after Accra. And therefore, why would you have a piloting like that and you don't have it? So I insisted that they should extend it, get private entities who can take advantage of that. We give them the funds, monitor and ensure that they also help to execute this. Then the other one, we see how we can expand it. It's a job creation opportunity for several young people, particularly women. My focus is that all the interventions we have, and anywhere we go, I demand how many women have you recruited, because they constitute majority of the Ghanaian population, and therefore
action.
It's just even not affirmative. It's really so big that it is difficult for one company managing our waste management in this country. If you expand it, for me, I think that it is something that is good.
What role will technology play in all of this?
You realize when, and I'm happy you've asked this question. When I came, I engaged the various agencies. I went to Ghana Atomic Energy Commission, GAIC, and some of their institutes. I went to CSR and some of their institutes. I went to NBA, Nuclear Regulatory Authority. I went to National Biosafety Authority. I went to NRA, Nuclear Regulatory Authority, and Waste Management. I visited, and I was flabbergasted. The capacity of these agencies to help solve the dependency of this country on other countries for basic commodities. Something positive came out of that.
Okay.
When we went to CSR, particularly the Corp Research Institute, I was shocked that they could produce a lot of food, wholesome food for school feeding. And we raised this when we went for the budget hearing, and it is pleasing to announce that the Ministry of Finance agreed on principle to see if they can engage CSR to supply this wholesome food for our kids in our schools under the school feeding. And I think for me that is positive. It's an opportunity for CSR to be empowered financially and to produce more. They have the capacity to produce. They have the capacity to produce. There is demand to produce, but they don't have resources to put that capacity to use. And that is what we are looking at. I intend, if I can explain to His Excellency the President to visit those agencies. I was shocked the capacity of the agencies to do that which this country so need and desire. So what we do is that I'm engaging even the Ministry of Health. There's something that they does where there are some machineries or sterilizations that they do. They rely on foreign companies to do that. GAIC and some of their institutes have the capacity to be able to do that, and these are some of the things we are doing. I believe once we do this, we'll be able to empower those agencies financially. Now once they have the financial capability, they'll be able to expand, and once they expand, they enjoy the economies of scale, cost of production comes down, and they'll be able to supply some of the things that we need as a state.
Okay, I'm sure, and I hope that your constituents in Tamale Central don't get to miss you so much, because you're busy. You have started work in earnest.
Absolutely. And I was supposed to go to the constituency on Saturday, but when His Excellency the President asked me to represent him, who am I to say no? So I had to. So that I was denied the opportunity. Usually what I do is that every weekends I try to spend the weekends in the constituency. Now, and by Monday I should be here. So if I go on Saturday morning, spend Saturday, Sunday, Monday morning, I need to be in Accra. Again, that is the difficulty of some of the things we do.
Amazing talking to you, Honorable Tupaya. We're so grateful to have you on GTB Breakfast. What that we have unpacked, or the Minister of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation, we've spanned through waste management, electronic vehicles, climate change, environment sustainability, tree planting, a tree per a child, and all the projects that the ministry will be rolling out, policies that the President, John Dramani Mahama, has spoken about in the lead up to the campaign that led to the NDC winning power in 2024. I am Altity Side